The Galactic Council chamber was a monument to arrogance, a sprawling dome of shimmering alloys and holographic displays that proclaimed the might of its inhabitants. Hundreds of representatives, from insectoid diplomats to crystalline envoys, gathered in their assigned seats, the air filled with an unshakable certainty. The council's word was law. Dominating the room was a central podium where a towering avian figure, the presiding chancellor, gazed imperiously across the assembly. The matter at hand was clear. The Terran Empire, the upstart species from a remote corner of the galaxy, had defied the Council's authority for too long. The Terran expansion threatens the balance of power, the Chancellor declared, its voice an echoing trill that demanded attention. Their refusal to integrate into the Galactic Union is an act of rebellion. We cannot allow such insolence to fester. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some agreed, their disdain for humanity apparent, while others watched silently, weighing their options. To many, humans were little more than a curiosity, a young species clawing its way into relevance through sheer stubbornness. But they had grown too fast, conquered too much. Their rise was becoming a problem. The Terran representative, a lone figure seated in a stark, utilitarian chair at the periphery of the chamber, rose slowly. Dressed in a modest uniform devoid of the ostentation common among the Council's elite, the human ambassador seemed almost unremarkable in the grandiose setting. But there was something in their posture, a quiet confidence, a subtle defiance, that made even the most condescending of Council members pause. "You speak of balance," the ambassador began, their tone measured, calm. "Yet what you demand is servitude. Humanity has no desire for conflict, but neither will we kneel. Your ultimatum is clear. We will consider your terms." The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted, some laughing at what they saw as humanity's inevitable capitulation, others scoffing at the perceived insolence. The Chancellor raised a clawed hand to silence the uproar, glaring at the human. "Consider quickly, Ambassador. The Council's fleets are vast. Your refusal would mean annihilation." The ambassador did not flinch. "We understand the consequences." With that, they sat, their expression unreadable. No grand rebuttal, no fiery speech. Just those final, enigmatic words. As the session adjourned, whispers filled the hall. To most, the Terran response was an admission of defeat, a delay before the inevitable surrender. But among a few, a sliver of doubt crept in. The humans had not begged, had not pleaded. They had simply waited, and there was something unsettling about the calm with which they did so. On the journey back to Earth, the ambassador sat in silence, the weight of the Council's arrogance still fresh in their mind. Communication channels buzzed with updates from Terran High Command. The ultimatum had been expected. Preparations were already underway. Humanity's response had been carefully planned. Every word a calculated move in a game the Council didn't yet realize they were losing. In the heart of the Terran capital, a council of leaders convened. Holograms of admirals, scientists, and strategists filled the chamber, their expressions grim but resolute. The ambassador's report was brief. "They believe we are weak. They think we will yield." The Terran Emperor, a figure whose very presence radiated authority, nodded. "And what do we believe?" "We believe they've underestimated us," came the reply. "We will not wait for their fleets to arrive at our borders. We will strike first." The room was silent, not out of fear, but agreement. Plans that had been in the making for decades were set into motion. Humanity's vast fleets, hidden in the shadows of distant systems, began their quiet mobilization. Engineers and scientists worked tirelessly, finalizing technologies the Council couldn't imagine. Factories hummed with relentless efficiency, producing weapons designed not just to defend, but to dominate. As humanity prepared, the Galactic Council remained oblivious. Their fleets, massive and cumbersome, were symbols of power but not adaptability. Their strategies, forged over centuries of unchallenged supremacy, lacked the innovation and flexibility that humanity thrived on. And in their arrogance, they dismissed the idea that a primitive species could ever pose a real threat. But humanity had learned from their history. They had faced extinction before on their own world at their own hands. They had rebuilt, stronger and more united than ever. To them, this was just another test, another obstacle to overcome. And they would not fail. The Council, drunk on its own hubris, had thrown down a gauntlet. Humanity had picked it up, not as a token of surrender, but as a declaration of war. The ambassador's final message to Earth echoed in every Terran heart. We don't negotiate with threats. We answer them. The Terran Empire's response was swift, precise, and utterly devoid of hesitation. As soon as the ambassador's report reached Earth, High Command mobilized their plans with surgical efficiency. Across the Terran territories, vast fleets began to emerge from their hidden bases, concealed within asteroid belts, beneath planetary crusts, and cloaked behind artificial moons. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human ingenuity, designed not for show but for purpose. Sleek, modular, and brimming with advanced weaponry, these ships represented the culmination of centuries of relentless innovation. In the war rooms of Earth's Central Command, strategists worked tirelessly, mapping out every detail of the coming conflict. The Galactic Council's arrogance had provided them with an invaluable advantage: predictability. The Council's fleets were vast, but they relied on outdated doctrines and bloated bureaucratic chains of command. Their movements were slow, their strategies rigid. Humanity's planners saw not an unstoppable force, but a lumbering giant, vulnerable to 1,000 precise cuts. Every human system was mobilized. Factories ran around the clock, producing weapons, drones, and modular components for ships. Scientists worked alongside military engineers, refining energy shielding and adaptive armor that could counter the Council's energy-based weaponry. On barren planets and deep space installations, experimental projects long deemed too dangerous were dusted off and accelerated. This was no longer a time for caution. It was a time for survival. The heart of humanity's preparations lay in their ability to innovate beyond the Council's imagination. Unlike the ancient empires of the galaxy, humanity's technology was not the product of millennia of stagnation. It was young, aggressive, and unpredictable. The centerpiece of their strategy was a groundbreaking weapon, a warp destabilizer, capable of disrupting the hyperspace lanes the Council relied upon for instantaneous fleet movements. This technology, a marriage of theoretical physics and audacious engineering, had been deemed impossible by the galaxy's more conservative minds. Humanity had proven otherwise. Meanwhile, the Terran fleet began drills unlike anything seen before. In simulated battles, captains and pilots tested guerrilla tactics designed to exploit the Council's weaknesses. Fleets split into smaller units, moving with precision and coordination that only advanced AI-assisted systems could provide. Each maneuver was crafted to outpace, outthink, and outfight the Council's monolithic forces. Beyond the hardware and strategy, humanity's greatest weapon lay in their people. Across the Empire, billions united with a singular purpose. Engineers volunteered for grueling shifts. Civilians trained as reserve pilots and technicians. There was no division, no hesitation. Every human, whether soldier or scientist, played a role in ensuring their survival. This unity, born from the countless struggles of their shared history, was a force no technology could replicate. The Council, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within Terran space. Reports of human activity trickled in, dismissed as desperation rather than preparation. The Council had never faced an opponent willing to fight not for conquest, but for existence. They failed to understand that humanity's strength came not just from their technology, but from their unyielding will. As the fleets prepared to launch, the final details of the strategy were laid out. The Terran Empire's approach was not to meet the Council head-on. That would be folly. Instead, they would dismantle the Council's power piece by piece. Supply lines would be severed, key installations destroyed, and logistical hubs rendered useless. By the time the Council realized the extent of the threat, it would be too late. On Earth, the mood was not one of fear, but determination. The people understood the stakes. They had seen what happened to species that had knelt before the Council. Assimilation was not peace, it was erasure. Humanity would not fade into the annals of galactic history as another footnote. They would stand, fight, and carve their place among the stars with their own hands. And so, with every engine ignited, every weapon armed, and every mind resolute, humanity prepared to strike. The Council's fleets arrived at the edges of Terran-controlled space with an air of absolute confidence. The armada stretched for light years, a collection of ships so massive and numerous that they seemed invincible. Each vessel gleamed with the technological pride of centuries, their weapons capable of reducing planets to ash. To the Council, the Terran Empire was an upstart species about to learn its place. This was not a war. It was a display of dominance. But what the Council failed to realize was that they had stepped into a battlefield shaped entirely by their enemy. The first sign of trouble came when their lead vessels attempted to establish communication. Every channel was met with silence. The humans were not responding, nor were they retreating. Instead, the Terran systems appeared eerily calm, their defenses deceptively quiet. It wasn't the chaos of a panicked foe. It was the calculated stillness of a predator lying in wait. Then came the first strike. A Council dreadnought, a colossal ship bristling with weaponry, suddenly vanished from its formation. There was no explosion, no visible attack, just a ripple in space as the vessel's warp drive collapsed in on itself. Panic rippled through the fleet. Reports flooded in of strange energy signatures disrupting hyperspace stability. The Council had relied on their ability to move their forces instantaneously across vast distances. Now, those pathways were being severed one by one. Humanity had unleashed their warp destabilizers with ruthless precision. Entire sectors of space became no-go zones for the Council's fleets, forcing them into slower, more vulnerable sublight travel. And while the Council scrambled to adapt, the Terran fleets made their move. The first human attack came not in the form of a grand confrontation, but a series of pinpoint strikes. Small, agile strike groups emerged from hidden locations, hitting supply convoys and key logistical hubs. Council outposts were obliterated before reinforcements could even be dispatched. Each attack was surgical, leaving no survivors to report back. The Terrans didn't fight like the Council's usual adversaries, who relied on brute force. They fought with strategy, adapting to every weakness and exploiting every flaw. In the chaos, the Council began to realize the extent of their underestimation. Human ships, though smaller in number, were faster and more versatile. Their weaponry, unbound by the conservative designs of the galactic powers, used technologies the Council couldn't counter. Railguns capable of piercing even the thickest armor. EMP pulses that rendered entire fleets inoperative. Adaptive cloaking systems that made detection almost impossible. The Council's ships, built for grand displays of firepower, were ill-suited for this kind of warfare. But the most devastating blow wasn't physical, it was psychological. The Council's fleets were accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer numbers and firepower. Against humanity, they found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Morale began to waver as even their largest ships fell prey to the Terrans' relentless ingenuity. Admirals, once confident in their superiority, were left grasping at strategies that crumbled before they could be enacted. Meanwhile, on the Terran side, there was no celebration, no resting on laurels. Every victory was a step in a long and arduous process. Commanders analyzed every encounter, refining tactics and strategies in real time. Human soldiers and pilots fought with an intensity born not of hatred, but of determination. They knew what was at stake. Not just their lives, but the survival of their species and their right to exist on their own terms. For the first time in its history, the Galactic Council faced an enemy that wasn't afraid of them. An enemy that didn't see them as gods or rulers, but as equals to be fought and defeated. Humanity had taken the Council's ultimatum and turned it into an opportunity, not just to survive, but to prove that they belonged among the stars. The Council's fleets, though still vast, were bleeding. Every lost ship, every disrupted supply chain, and every failed counteroffensive chipped away at their once unshakable dominance. For the first time, the Council began to understand the magnitude of their mistake. They hadn't just underestimated humanity's strength. They had underestimated their resolve. The Council's forces were faltering, their confidence eroded by wave after wave of Terran ingenuity and defiance. What had begun as an ultimatum had spiraled into a war they were no longer sure they could win. Their fleets, once symbols of unassailable power, were now fractured and scattered, struggling to maintain cohesion. Communication lines were in disarray, hyperspace lanes rendered unusable by the Terran warp destabilizers. What remained of their command structure scrambled to adapt, but the Council's centuries-old doctrines had left them unprepared for the sheer unpredictability of their enemy. For humanity, this was the moment to strike the final blow. Terran High Command, ever calculating, issued its next directive: the complete neutralization of the Council's central fleet. Intelligence gathered through covert operations and intercepted transmissions revealed the fleet's location. A vast armada regrouping near the Council's homeworld, attempting to consolidate its strength. To many, it seemed an impenetrable fortress. To the Terrans, it was a target. The operation was set in motion with precision. As the Council's fleet regrouped, the humans unleashed the full might of their technological arsenal. Drones equipped with advanced AI infiltrated enemy formations, jamming communications and sowing confusion. Swarms of smaller ships launched hit-and-run attacks, drawing the Council's fire and forcing them to waste resources on futile pursuits. Meanwhile, Terran capital ships remained hidden, waiting for the perfect moment to engage. The Council's admirals, desperate to reassert control, ordered their ships into defensive formations, but it was already too late. The humans didn't fight by the rules the Council understood. Their tactics were fluid, constantly evolving to exploit every weakness. The battle was not a clash of fleets, but a carefully orchestrated dismantling of an enemy too slow to keep up. And then humanity unveiled its final weapon. In the heart of the Terran fleet, a single experimental vessel powered up, a massive dreadnought equipped with a prototype gravitic disruptor. This weapon, the product of years of clandestine research, was capable of generating localized gravitational anomalies, tearing apart enemy ships without ever firing a single shot. As the disruptor activated, the battlefield shifted. Council ships, unable to compensate for the sudden gravitational shifts, were ripped apart or sent careening into one another. The devastation was absolute. Within minutes, the Council's central fleet was in ruins. Survivors attempted to flee, but the Terran ships, faster and more agile, intercepted them with ruthless efficiency. For the first time in galactic history, the Council had been defeated not by internal dissent or natural disaster, but by an external force, a species they had dismissed as insignificant. As the remnants of the Council's forces retreated, humanity did not pursue. The point had been made. The Terran Empire did not seek conquest or revenge. They sought only to live free from the chains of arrogance and domination. In the aftermath of the battle, a message was broadcast across the galaxy. Not from the Council, but from humanity. It was simple, direct, and unyielding. To those who believe they are our masters, we are not subjects, and we will not bow. To those who wish for peace, we are willing to stand as equals. But to those who threaten us, we will fight and we will win. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the Terrans returned to their space, their fleets battered but unbroken. Across countless worlds, species who had suffered under the Council's rule began to see humanity in a new light, not as invaders or disruptors, but as a symbol of resistance. For the first time, the idea that the Council could fall was no longer unthinkable. In the halls of the Galactic Council, the mood was one of despair. The surviving representatives, once so assured of their supremacy, now faced the reality of their failure. Their fleets were crippled, their authority challenged, and their reputation shattered. For centuries, they had ruled through fear, but fear was no longer enough. They had created an enemy they could not defeat. Humanity, however, did not celebrate. There was no victory parade, no declaration of triumph. They understood that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there would always be those who sought to dominate. But humanity had proven something undeniable. They were no longer the upstarts on the fringes of the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, unyielding and unstoppable. As the Terran fleets returned home, The Empire turned its gaze inward, preparing for what lay ahead. The Council's ultimatum had backfired spectacularly, igniting a fire that could not be extinguished. Humanity had faced the impossible and emerged stronger. Their message was clear not just to the Council but to the galaxy itself. Humanity was here to stay.